chapter 1136, it feels like it's been ages since the last time a chapter was released. So in a sense, it's like time has passed slowly, but then again, I look at the date and we're already over halfway into January, even though New Year's felt like it was yesterday. So this just means that I'm having an existential crisis because this year is going to be over in the blink of an eye and One Piece is going to be even closer to completion. So that's me making my own sadness, but in all seriousness, I have heard that this has been One Piece's driest period ever in terms of chapter releases over the past 3 months, taking into account Oda's breaks and all the Shonen Jump magazine breaks and the holidays. That all happens during this time of year, but we're here now, 1136 chapters in and still pushing, and this is a very good one. Briefly on the cover story first, I don't normally talk about it because we're still waiting for it to really take off, which is fine, you know, there's plenty of time. I think many were spoiled by the direction the last cover story went in with Germa, like seeing Kuzan and Vanoga abducting Pudding, to all of the Vegapunk stuff like the formation of Mads and him meeting the elders. This one with Yamato's journey across the nation is kind of bringing things back down to earth, since if you remember the cover story before the Germa one followed Pound trying to reunite with his daughters, so while I'm sure there was maybe 1 or 2 people who were really deeply invested in that, it wasn't giving any big reveals. It was a side story. That's what cover stories are, especially considering that one lasted for 37 chapters and the longest cover story to date from the Decks of the World lasted for 48 chapters, so there's plenty of time for this current one to get going since it's only been going for 22 chapters so far, so about halfway there. And I'm sticking with my idea in saying that there will be a huge reveal or moment by the time it's done, and that will be the Blackbeard pirates, or part of them at least, showing up to Wano to retrieve the ancient weapon Pluton. Maybe the cover story will end with Blackbeard's boot in the foreground while Yamato looks at Blackbeard in the background, or maybe a massive earthquake hits, but it's just in fact Blackbeard using his powers to bring down the walls around the country, and that's where the cover story ends. So there's still hope. I would personally like a Big Mom or Kaido return teased at the end of the cover story. Maybe that's, well, I think it is an unpopular opinion, but the point is that there's still a long way to go. We return with the feast, and Yarul is as big as we thought he was in the last chapter. He looks even bigger here, but that comes down to the fact that Broggy in his own right is actually one of the biggest giants. So these guys, Hyrudin and his crew, are smaller than him, which in turn makes Yarul look even bigger. We get a couple of small details which I appreciate since they help to flesh out this country even more. The first is that humans arrive on this island and they think that the underworld is the whole country, and they end up fleeing out of fear, which makes sense since without one of those sunstone painters there's no way for them to make it up the tree to the sun world. Another thing is their interest in Jinbei and Brook, because being thousands of meters above sea level they would have never gotten the chance to see a fishman, and as for Brook, well, it's Brook. He's a dead man walking, so he's a spectacle wherever he goes. And even though Elbaf doesn't practice isolationism, I guess it's still the same as any other country where you can only really leave by sailing, becoming a pirate. So most of its citizens, inhabitants, have probably never left. We have Usopp telling tales of their journey and mentioning Oz, and this is what I was wishing for. Oz is a legendary warrior amongst the giants. This is the ancient giant lore that I was asking for, and please do not let this be all we get. Although I think it's Usopp saying Oz is a legendary warrior to the giants, but I don't think that was something that we already knew unless my memory is playing games with me. I'm sure this is the first time we're hearing about this, but it makes sense and I want to hear more. So is it safe to assume Oz is from Elbaf? And if he was born over 500 years ago and lived to be 159 years old where he froze to death, does that mean that the elder Yarul, who is over 400 years old, could have met him when he was a lot younger? Did the ancient giants have a role to play during the Void Century? I hope so. And apparently every giant has some kind of dream of being the sun god, but this country is becoming more and more divided the more we learn about it. First it was the old generation of warriors and the newer generation of pacifists, and now there's the clash over the truth behind Nika, where some think he's a liberator while others think he is a destroyer or even one who laughs. So up to now, everything we have learned about him is that he is a liberator, brings smiles to all of the people, the last thread of hope in their miserable lives. Almost certainly it has a connection to Loki, who claims to be the sun god himself and will be the one to bring about the end of the world. The ultimate destroyer. So Loki's self-belief that he is the sun god must have been born out of the fact that the giants as a whole believing that the legendary devil fruit was the Nika fruit. Maybe Loki was already claiming to be the sun god as a kid, and him eating the fruit just kind of like amplified his belief. What if Harald's peaceful nature was rooted in the idea of him being brought up and told stories of Nika being a purely destructive being, so he devoted himself to counteracting that, and that's why he became a pacifist? There's also the possibility that it just comes down to interpretation and the truth changing slightly over time. Like at the end of the story, it's widely believed that Luffy as joyboy and as the sun god will destroy the red line, and in doing so it will mean freeing the entire world. So what if that nuance and context was lost as time went on and the truth split into two branches, one where he is a liberator and one where he is a destroyer? The first thing that comes to mind is Madame Charlotte's vision of Luffy walking among the flames on a destroyed Fishman Island. So Fishman Island will be destroyed, but in turn its residents will be free and will have their place under the sun. So it's not so black and white as to decide whether he is a liberator or a destroyer. It will be both, as well as being the one who laughs. But what follows is the real good stuff, where firstly no one can read the ancient language of Elbaf's mythology. Harley, Robin, it's definitely her time to shine once again. She will decipher that in no time. But also that this world has already been destroyed twice. That kind of blows my mind, because the reason I like it so much is Ragnarok obviously being the end of everything. In Norse mythology, after Ragnarok is meant to be sort of a rebirth, a new world rising up after it. So essentially the One Piece world has already witnessed two Ragnaroks already, and my first instinct is that with Jarl also saying Nika is mentioned in the text along with each of these times the world is destroyed, these two times that the world has already been destroyed each coincide with the appearance of the sun god. First the original sun god, and this must have happened thousands and thousands of years ago when Nika first appeared, and the second one would be Joyboy during the Void Century 8 to 900 years ago. And although it probably is the case that the Void Century has been incorporated into the mythology of Elbaf, I would also argue that with the giant's extended lifespan, the Void Century is more like recent history than mythology, kind of like in real life where stuff happened hundreds of years ago, but it's real history. So there's always a chance that these two times where the world was already destroyed, neither of those are referring to the Void Century, but rather another event in between the first coming of Nika and the Void Century where the world was destroyed for the second time. Although logically thinking it most likely will be the Void Century. And there's another new look at Nika, the true Nika seemingly, and this is by far the clearest look we've gotten so far, and it really does feel like a discovery, kind of like this is an ancient mural that's just been uncovered. We're witnessing history if we ever get a clear look of Nika unsilhouetted, completely full in all his glory, uncensored, whatever. I might go insane. I mean, this image alone right here is making me lose my mind. With a sword and a shield, not a spear this time. But why not? Because the whole thing with this guy is that whoever it is, they fight in whatever way they want. So maybe the original fought with every single weapon under the sun. Either that, or they just held on to the weapons while punching people normally, which we've seen Luffy do. We also learn more about Loki's life up to when he was in prison, some big details. And his life has kind of been a mix of Shirahoshi and Oden, where his birth was prophesized, and right after he was born it was incident after incident, calamity after calamity, either directly or just bad things happened and the blame was placed on him, like the country getting hit with natural disasters, and also his mother's death a year after he was born. That one just seems unnecessary to blame on him. Like, I understand that she was your queen and honor and everything, but it was also his mother, so maybe blaming him for that is a step too far. We learn about how he made the underworld his bitch and how he terrorized the village, even more so when Harald was away. Harald, who they say is Elbaf's greatest monarch ever, so it seems that even with his pacifist agenda, which got some pushback from some elders, he was still incredibly well respected, the most respected. We see a statue of him and he looks strong, you know, he looks mighty, so I'm guessing he was incredibly powerful as well in his own right, but he wouldn't use that power. A literal gentle giant Although, and let me use Mother Carmel as the example here, the giants obviously view her as one of the greatest people they ever met, but we know what she was like in the background. She was a human trafficker, so in this situation Harald still isn't cleared yet, and there's still a very strong possibility that Harald was doing stuff behind the scenes and Loki found out about it, which is why he went to kill him. And with them saying Loki caused havoc when Harald wasn't looking, that sounds suspicious. Like, what was he doing in the meantime while his son was terrorizing his people? Jarl got that sword through his skull by trying to stop Loki from killing his father, so it turns out it wasn't a misunderstanding. Loki really wanted to kill him, and after killing his father he set out to sea, where his advance was eventually halted by the red-haired wonder, Mr. Not the Emperor of the Sea just yet, Shanks, who took him back to Elbaf, and this is surely the incident that made him an Emperor of the Sea. So this would have been how Loki got his 2.6 billion bounty, by going out into the world and causing chaos. And this should be enough proof of his true strength, for that he is truly strong. If it was Shanks who had to stop him, and if stopping Loki was enough to garner the attention of the world government and make Shanks an Emperor, and the special part of his bounty is due to the fact that he's already pretty much imprisoned, just not by the world government. I wonder if this was Shanks' first visit to the Island of the Giants, or if he's been there before. But again, even with Shanks' involvement, all of this only serves to hype up Loki even more. I mean, he turned elbaf upside down and he set out to sea. He was ready to turn the whole world upside down right from the word go. And no wonder he doesn't like Shanks. And one more thing is that this does mean now that Loki is the common factor between Shanks and his twin brother. Moving forward, the OG trio of Luffy, Zoro and Nami make their way to get the keys to Loki's chains, Zoro coming along just in case Luffy was lied to, and that may be the case. Loki may have only said what he thought Luffy would want to hear, but he also may have told the truth. Loki may actually know where Shanks is, because I can form an image in my mind where Loki still has a sizable network of followers and he is fed information through them, so that may be how he knows of Shanks' whereabouts. It's also good to see Zoro checking Luffy like he's often done in the story, fulfilling his role as first mate. Well, not first mate, I guess, because it's kind of blasphemous in the community to call Zoro the first mate, as one of the wings of the future king of the pirates. There we go. Nami is also coming because she doesn't think they'll be able to find their own way, which is just as valid, if not more so valid reasoning than any other of her joining the other two to go see Loki. Luffy has already been, obviously, but with Zoro, Zoro will lead him up into the heaven world somehow. So you need the ultimate navigator to disrupt the ultimate misdirection, literally misdirection. But at the end of the day, it's all about the money. And I've just had this thought that these are characters in One Piece. They're characters drawn in a stylized way, but everyone can see Nami's eyes turning to the berry symbol, so in universe, is that kind of like body horror? Also, Road is coming along to serve as transport, and he's basically become the punching bag for this arc, which is great. And we also learn that the two Holy Knights members are down there with Loki, and that's where the three are headed next. So I'm expecting this to be the first big fight of the arc, a fight where we get to see Zoro and Luffy fighting side by side. The Sun God Gear 5 and the King of Hell, two conquerors. That would be absolutely crazy. Maybe it's those two against the Holy Knights members while Nami works to unchain Loki. I don't think Loki will take either side here. He won't openly join us and he won't openly join them, obviously. He is the ultimate third party. But the image of Loki being freed and holding that giant hammer which is behind him, which is gonna be Mjolnir, although it may also have a different name, something more relevant to One Piece, like how the World Tree Yggdrasil is the Treasure Tree Adam. This entire set piece, if it does come to pass, will be on another level, hopefully. And as for those Holy Knights members, they do want to recruit Loki into their ranks and make him one of them. Again, this surely has to lead back to that devil fruit. I thought from the last chapter that they were here to kill Loki so that power couldn't be used against them, or maybe to retrieve it, and he would be an easy target since he was chained up, but instead of killing him, they are headhunting him. Loki isn't a celestial dragon, and that maybe puts into question the blood of the other members of the group now. They may only be doing this to have Loki and his power on their side rather than against them, but I've seen a theory floating around that some of the Holy Knights may be a few of the kids from Big Mom's flashback, since some of the designs match up. Remember that we don't actually know what happened to them after Big Mom entered an eating trance. We assume that they were cannibalized, but we don't know. Mother Carmel definitely was, since Big Mom gained the powers of the devil fruit, the soul fruit. But for all we know, the kids might have just run away, although there is a big hole in this idea, I think, which is the Holy Knights pass judgment on the celestial dragon dragons, and I don't think those scum would allow people from the lower world to hold a position higher than theirs, but it's still interesting to theorize about, and I still think it is an option. We get the name of the woman, Gunko, which means war drum. In Japanese, that's one of the translations. May or may not be linked to the drums of liberation, maybe not, probably not. Makes me think though, who among the celestial dragons aside from the elders and Imu are aware of Nika, either the existence or the mythology? Like, if a Holy Knights member was told the name Joyboy or Nika, it's safe to assume they'll know what they're talking about. But if you asked a Saint Charlos or someone, would he know who Nika or Joyboy is, or is their historical knowledge limited to our ancestors founded the world government and that makes us better than you? Is the average celestial dragon aware of the war 800 years ago, the circumstances that led to the present, or are they simply too busy acting superior? Because with this whole situation circling and revolving around Loki, who claims to be the sun god, the world government allowing their greatest enemy into their home, even though it isn't actually him, but still, is very unexpected, although a welcome surprise, if it were to happen, that is. But obviously Loki isn't going to join the Holy Knights, and he's refusing their advancements. He's actually openly mocking them, so Loki is aware of how the world works with his short time at sea, and he knows the celestial dragons are filth. So Loki just ticks all the boxes, doesn't he? Even with his speech at the end about fate and holding onto his fury. He's such a good character, and he hasn't done anything yet. This Gunko also uses her sleeves bandages to subdue a wolf that Loki told to eat her, and the first thing that comes to mind when I see these abilities is Imu's arrow, because you can see the resemblance, and I did think from the last chapter that whatever technique she used to subdue the giant god may have been bestowed by Imu directly, and this arrow kind of helps that theory, but there is the possibility that it is just the bandage fruit or something. On the note of this arc, by the way, each chapter I've said that there's been no time to breathe, and that there's been something big happening in each chapter, but now I know I'm not imagining things, because it really feels like we're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, especially with the, or potentially the Holy Knights fight just around the corner, unless they retreat, which might be a possibility, and the true conflict on Elbaf will be these cracks forming amongst the giants around Loki and Luffy. Who is actually the sun god? What's the true nature of the sun god? Luffy freeing Loki? All of these points are things that will divide the giants between those who back Luffy, those who don't, those who want to fight, and those who want peace. I think this arc in the long run will be the giants versus the giants. This arc is going to be an elbaf civil war.